Hello, welcome in everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 4. I am so excited for episode 4. Every week, I'm writing a lot. I'm taking some time to just write it out, to research. It's honestly kind of soothing. And this week, I was thinking a lot about the episode and what the podcast was going to be about, and it started off as okay, I kind of want to talk about how we've obviously I want to talk about primaries because we didn't touch on that. But it just wasn't long enough for a full episode. And so I kind of just wanted to touch on like the numbness of social media, or I guess the numbness of how social media makes us numb, and I just been having all these thoughts and just thinking about all these like epidemics that we've had just since I've been alive, and just kind of how everything just feels like meh. Okay, what's the next thing? What's the next big thing? We all just feel so numb. So that was like kind of where I wanted to go with it. And, I was sitting at work on, I don't know, I was like Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and I had a guy walk in, and just a dad, maybe a grandpa, maybe in his 50s. I don't know. I don't really care about age, but I'm just trying to like gauge how I talk to this guy, because you always want to like just make them comfortable and make the process not so like agonizing and teeth pulling, like, and so, we just started talking, and it's just kind of weird how I've been resonating with the dads and the grandpas so much. And like, these are the people that I can get like to open up and to talk about these things, And I'm like, that's not like bashing on any of my female people, but I think that maybe just guys are more into that, or just maybe they're just more willing to have those hard conversations. And I tell people like, if you like, I don't even know how we started the conversation up. I don't know if it was maybe the primaries that just came up or something. Yeah, I'm always trying to test the waters and see like how far I can push the conversation, because I've been doing what I do for 11 years, and I could have the same conversation, literally the same conversation 10 times a day, and if I'm not trying to mix it up, my day can be long and monotonous and repetitive, and it's already boring some days, so why not spice it up, And so somehow we just started talking about like getting into voting and what that kind of means, in terms of like, I wish I could remember how we started talking about it, but I wanted to recap some of the conversation that we had because I thought it was just so important. And so he was telling me that news is just gone. Like, he doesn't watch the news, and this is like an older gentleman, like probably somebody that I were to have guessed like watch Fox News, just like age range, just that type of people, And he said, no, get rid of the news, and it's just all fabricated, and they tell you part of the story with emphasis on a small thing, or they make it over dramatic just to like reel you in, which we all know. And so he said, just get rid of all news and turn to podcasts and independent journalists, and researching everything yourself. And so he seemed like really in tune what was going on, and he had mentioned some podcasts that I'm going to check out. And he's really an advocate of just turning off the news. And he says that people need to start voting and showing up, right? And I don't want to say they make it easy, because you definitely have to go out and research, but they give you time, they give you the place. I know here in Idaho it's super easy to register to vote. Like, I thought I had gone and got my driver's license, and I swear they ask you if you want to be a registered voter, but apparently I wasn't. And so I went to the Idaho voters.gov or whatever it is for Idaho, and I just registered, and they gave a sample ballot, and I told him, I told him, I was like, yeah, it's so easy. I didn't realize how easy it was, and I've never voted before, and now I'm getting involved, and he was like, yeah, you youngsters need to start going out and voting. I'm like, I know I look young, but I'm not that young. And then we talked about that for a little bit and whatever, but he says that we need to get involved. And so because we were kind of on voting and what it means to be a voter and to have that privilege, because not everybody has that privilege, to be able to have their voice heard. I raised the question. I was like, well, I guess I didn't raise the question. I more shared my fears, because I'm not going to question this man. He seems like he's a lot more in tune to kind of what's going on than maybe I even am, because he has the wisdom, And so I literally was just like, well, I'm gonna share my fear, and my fear is I'm getting involved. I'm telling people to go vote. I'm trying to do the research. I'm trying to share my research, trying anything I can. And the only way I know how to do that, but how do we continue to do that if we know that these big, I don't know if they're corporate, I don't know what they are, but they're buying seats, right? Again, I don't know all these things, APAC, all these different voices and things getting involved and putting their money into these seats. How can we ensure that our votes are counted for and they're not bought out? Because we see that with Thomas Massey, we're seeing that in the news. And how is that going to transpire just because they don't necessarily agree with how the president handled the Epstein files, which we'll touch on here in shortly, and so he literally said that he didn't have a solution. He does not know. The only solution that he has is knowledge and people knowing that these things are out there, because these things have been happening for years and years and years, and nobody's been talking about the influence our greatest ally has, right? Nobody's been talking about how the system is rigged, and at the end, it's so interesting how everything ties together, right? Because we've been talking about midterms, which I thought were primaries, and so it's kind of interesting how at the end of today's episode, how we're going to go through primaries and how things kind of look similar to how they did in 1968, and kind of how we're getting a taste of it, And so he didn't have a solution other than having knowledge, because knowledge is power, right? And banding together. And that's the big thing, is banding together, voting, having the research, right? Being a community and talking to each other. Because it's us against the government. That's what it feels like. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be me against you, right? It should be us against them at this point. It should be the little people versus the government that's taking our money and funding wars and all these various things that they're funding, that the AI data centers, the ballroom, all these things that we didn't ask to be funded with our taxpayer money, but are, and so it's just interesting that he didn't even have a solution other than knowledge, because knowledge is power. And so he was talking about how kind of podcasts and independent journalism is going to be the next big thing. And, I kind of I work in the industry. I don't really want to say where I want to work or where I work, but I work in the industry that electronics and technology, like that's the industry that I'm in. And throughout the years, I've seen the difference that having electronics in your life makes, and what that's done to me. When I get home, like I do very minimal things on my electronics. I have even cut back because of all of like the elite stuff and all the JE stuff and just all the crazy things. Like I have opted out of subscriptions. I don't have Spotify. I don't have Netflix. I literally don't have anything that I'm paying for. I have YouTube Lite, and that's so I can get my podcasts, and I have minimal ads. That's it. And that's like that's one of the cheapest subscriptions out there that you can have. And that's the only thing. Everything else I kind of bum off of. If and I don't even feel like I use what I bum off of. It just sits there, not getting used. Everything that we online, YouTube is great. YouTube, you can find anything. You can have anything. So, we were talking about all of this, and I kind of shared. I haven't shared with like all of my immediate like circle. They know I've started a podcast, and I'm just getting the ground up, and I'm just doing the thing. And so I have told select customers that I've had really deep conversations with about my podcast, and the why behind I'm doing it. And I'm just going to share that today because I think it matters. It matters why I'm talking about voting. It matters why we're talking about how big entities and corporate companies and all these various voices, how they should not be allowed to buy out seats, And I told him my why. And again, a lot of people don't know this, but when Charlie Kirk died, when he was assassinated, when he was killed, I was with the county coroner. Of all the people, I was working with the county coroner, and one of my colleagues brought their device over, and they said Charlie Kirk was just killed. He was just shot, right? He was just shot. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what did you just say? That's crazy. Like, what world are we living in? Charlie Kirk is a big name. I might not have totally agreed with everything that Charlie Kirk, and I never like went out of my way to go watch Charlie Kirk videos, or I never watched his podcast. I knew who he was because of social media, because I knew somebody that went to one of his events here in Idaho, and so like I knew of him, and he just handed me his device and he said, look. And me and the coroner watched it together, and the coroner was just like, he's dead. There's no way he survived. There's no way, And it got really dark really quick, and, all day we were like, what's going on? What's happening? And that week, and maybe Turning Point did a great job of, gaslighting the country or whatever they did. They really used the momentum, right? But whatever happened, I felt like I was asleep. I didn't really care about politics. I was very much like, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't believe in the two-party system. I'm kind of a little bit of both. I feel like I lean more right, but I feel like I do have some left qualities, which my haters would beg to differ, right? But I still grew up in like a very liberal area, and I have come out of that, and I've had my own views now, but, I just felt like I was asleep, and like I wanted to be asleep. And it kind of awoke something in me. And, I started reading my Bible. I'd never read the Bible before. I started wanting to understand like that relationship and those teachings, because I always grew up with God around, whether it was, my grandparents being Mormon, and my grandma from being from the South, she had like that Southern Baptist or whatever. I never really got into it, but she always watched church on Sunday. It was usually on the TV. She didn't go out. She wasn't that type, but she used to watch like the mega churches on TV. There was something there, And then I went to Catholic school in 5th grade, and so I went to Mass Tuesdays and Thursdays. They tried to convert us, I had friends that went to like just a regular, I don't know, non-denominational Christian church. I don't know if it was like Baptist. There's something there in the town that I grew up in. And they'd always have like youth groups and things. So we would go to that, and then my stepdad, he's Native American. And so, I primarily grew up like in sweat lodges. Like on Sundays, and leading up to Sundances was Wednesdays, and we did ceremonies in the teepee, and that's how I grew up. I grew up with all of this like religion and all of this stuff around me, but I never read the Bible, and I thought, and that's what I did. So that's what changed, and it made me want to find a voice. There was this coworker of mine, and one day we were just talking, and I went off on this tangent, and he looked at me and he was just like, you should start a podcast. You have this energy that you want to talk to people. You can public speak. You can do these things. Like, you have something to say, why don't you do it? And then that inspired me even further, right? And this all transitioned like all after Charlie Kirk, I think how the investigation has been handled is another reason. Like, we should all be speaking out, like, things aren't right, There's obvious gaslighting, there's obvious limited hangouts going on, right? It's a weird world that we're living in. More people need to be talking about Charlie Kirk, about different local politics, like, and I saw, I can't remember, I think it was Megyn Kelly, it was somebody in the political world, but I think it was like Megyn Kelly, maybe she was talking to Sean Ryan, where she was saying that Trump had even said, like, change happens on the local level, and he can only affect so much because the states have to allow him to do it, And I thought that was a very powerful moment, especially on such a big show, where I'm like, yes, this is what I've been talking about. This is what I've been telling people. I'm like, if you want change to happen, you have to start on the local level. And once you have that momentum, then you can build it up to more. And it's going to take time. And it's going to take perseverance. And it's going to take people standing up, reaching out, speaking about real things, right? That's what it's going to take on the local level. And so as we kept talking, I'm telling him these things, and these are things that we're bantering back and forth about. He told me where he was, and, he put it the best way. He said, I was like, I don't know why I was awakened. I don't know why I was so enraged, I don't know why. I was like, I don't understand, but I have this fire in me to just understand, to just know, to just talk about it, And he said, he put it best. He said, you watch somebody get killed for expressing his First Amendment right. no matter where you sit, that's wrong, because that is your First Amendment right. Um, so I've been sitting on this conversation. It's been kind of cool. Um, we get in kind of wrapped into people being asleep, because I felt like I'd woken up, and I feel like more people are waking up and asking these questions, and so it wrapped into kind of, at least since I've been alive, right? I kind of touched on it at the beginning. But all the different psyops is what I feel. I've been talking to customers, right? I've been talking to people. We're talking about psyops. We're talking about all these different things in real time, so it's been kind of cool. But he touched on in my lifetime, right? How it's been COVID. We recently had the Hunta virus come out. There's been swine flu. Like, I don't know if y'all remember the swine flu, but my stepdad worked at the Native Hospital, and we all had to get swine flu vaccinations. And I don't know if you know, but like res towns in reservation areas, they generally get COVID shots and swine flu vaccinations before anyone else. I mean, there's its own conspiracies around that, but I got the swine flu vaccination back in the day. I remember them like sticking it up my nose and like spraying my brain. I did not like it, but had to do it. He worked at the Native Hospital. He had to do it. It was just like a requirement, And so I don't know if it was a requirement for me, but we got it, Most recently, the hantavirus, right? I feel like we all just kind of bullied the government into saying that's not real. Like, I know in New Mexico, they've been talking about hantavirus for many moons, because, like, there's lots of mice, and it's deserty, and it's very rampant there, So we were talking about all these things that it kind of feels like they give us, they give it to numb us, to, I don't know if it's to turn us off purposefully, let's just give them so much information that they're numb, and they don't understand that it really is wrong, but they can't do anything about it because it's just coming. That's probably a psyop too. It's all just one big psyop, to me. Something happens, I'm like, something happens at work and they're changing something, I'm like, it's a psyop. Bet you. They're seeing how far they can push us, It's a psyop. Ask anybody that works with me. I'm all about, they're not on the side of the little guy, And so another thing that we bullied the government on was AI data centers, There have been slowed progress. I've seen the reports of slowed progress, particularly in Idaho. In Pocatello, there's going to be a data center that was going to be put down, and, we said no. And that's why I know our voice, it does work when we band together, is because we see these little examples of us banding together because we all disagree, all parties disagree, it's wrong, and then it goes away, and so I just think it's kind of great. Maybe it's the way of the information, like it's going to come anyway, but I don't know. So we touched on kind of the positives, of that, of what a voice can do, or voices banding together can do, and it kind of led me to my next question. I asked this guy so many questions, and I'm just sitting here like this. I'm like, we're just talking, and I had like moments of dread, and I'm like, what? And we're learning about various things, And so I straight up asked him, I was like, how does the working class go out and protest, right? How do we combat the protesters, the loudest voices, the people that are doing these things, you know? We have responsibilities, we have families, we have businesses, we have tasks at home that we need to continue, you know? Like, we are the working class. We fund all of these crazy things. How are we supposed to go out, you know? And it's like it's a conundrum, you know? It's like, do we stop paying our taxes? And I presented this to him, you know, I'm like going down the rabbit hole. I'm like, do we stop paying our tax? Like, I believe in local taxes, okay? Like, do we stop paying our federal taxes? Do we just stop paying the Federal Reserve? Because they're not federal and they're not reserving anything. So why are we paying them if they're not doing the most basic thing, you know? And I literally, like, this is what I'm doing. I'm talking to my customer. I'm like, I don't understand. You have knowledge. Understand, you know? We're paying into these things, wars, the isms, all these things that we don't necessarily believe in, but we still have to pay our taxes, or we get jailed, or they come for us and our wages get garnished and all these things. Like, how do we combat it, you know? And again, he went back to podcasts, independent journalism, researching, voting, right? And he touched on how it's going to take time. It's going to take time to have everybody awoken, and it's going to take time for change, you know? And he was optimistic, but he just said, keep talking about it, you know? That's all we can do. That's all we can do. And vote, you know? And I kind of was snarky, and I was like, what? We're Civil War? Like, is that going to happen? Because I know that's not what's going to happen in fucking Idaho. Like, I'm hoping Idaho is just going to band together because we have community. We understand those things, you know. But I could see parts of the country tearing themselves apart, you know. The U.S. is just so big, you know. I just don't understand. Like, it's just so huge. And because it is so huge, it has to start on a local level. And we all have to be awoken, you know. But he kind of giggled. He was like, we've all had that thought, not paying your taxes. You know, I brought up, I was like, what about the Boston Tea Party? I was like, we don't have tea to throw into the Boston River. I was like, it's not like it is now, you know, like, oh, we're going to go throw some tea in the river. Like, nobody is going to go throw their hard-earned cash in the river, right? Like, he just giggled to me, you know. I'm bringing all these things up, and he was like, do you know what a constitutionalist is? And he explained it, and this is a term that I've been hearing a lot lately. And he just explained to me that a constitutionalist that means that government should be little, and it should follow what the U.S. Constitution says, and it should be interpreted as the framers intended, and how they understood it at the time. And it's supposed to be meant for the protection of individual liberties, right? And if the founding fathers, and if we were back in the days of the creation of the United States, like, I don't think they could fathom where it was going to go, but he said that he thinks that they would be disappointed in the government that we have now. I mean, I think we're all disappointed in the government that we have now, and I don't know if we need to take it back to the basics, you know. I know there are a lot of people that would not like the government to go away just based off like programs and benefits and things like that, you know, but he was just explaining to me what a constitutionalist is. And I've heard the term, obviously being a liberal, Republican, Democrat, constitutionalist, populist, libertarian. There's all these different names for people. And so I think that's going to be a setup for a future episode. What are these terms? What do they mean? Right? How do you identify as this? Or are you politically homeless? And that's another term that more and more people are saying day to day. I'm politically homeless. I'm seeing it on social media. Sometimes it feels like that way when you talk to people, because I'm testing. I want to test people. Like, I've been doing my job for so long. This is how I make a difference. Like, just talking to people. Talk to as many people as I do, might as well try and do something, try and pick their brain, try to understand. I've learned so much over the course of 11 years just from people and understanding people and wanting to know things, that why not test the boundaries a little bit. Let's see. I went and looked up what a constitutionalist is, right? And they also believe that government has no right to overstep boundaries, and that the Constitution is to preserve freedom and prevent tyranny, So, and one thing that as I was writing, I said, by the power of the people coming together is how we affect change. We stop bullying each other and we band together against one common enemy, and I think we would see change. And I think we're all kind of going through an awakening, and I'm going to give it to Charlie Kirk, like, I think he woke a lot of us up, and by us waking up, we're getting other people to wake up. Podcasts are becoming bigger, more huge. I hope that people out there have the willpower to get rid of Netflix and get rid of all these various platforms, streaming services and things like that, because I think that's just feeding into the corporate machine, subscriptions, feeding it in the machine. I've literally just been trying like hell to pay off debt, because why is everything on a payment system? Why can't I just pay it over time, right? I'm now starting to understand why the grandpas and the dads and the conspiracy theorists and everything, like, they don't want to be tied to it. It's just because it's an inevitable cog of the machine, and I told my customer this. I was like, this is the only way I can boycott right now, because I can't go out and protest. I can only go out and boycott with my money. That's it. And I might do minimal things, but I bet if everybody just got rid of the things, started being more present, going outside, coloring, flying a kite, reading a book, doing a puzzle, doing Sudoku, playing cards, right? Doing a book club. Like, painting. There are so many things that we could do in our day-to-day life, and I bet we would be more productive as a society if we got rid of the subscriptions. And that is the only, and I told that's the only thing that I've done that I can do to boycott, because I can't go out when I can't. And that's not something that really happens in Idaho. Like, we don't I would have to go and travel to do all these protests and things, and I just don't think it's effective. I don't think going out there and screaming and acting a fool is effective, and I had this lingering question, and it was weird that question popped into my head that morning. And he was like, I reach out to my senators. I reach out to my representatives. They know who I am. And maybe they don't know who he is, right? But he says that anytime that he does wants his voice to be, he will write to them because that's what they're there for. And I said, "What? You can still do that? That's a thing?" And I said, I literally stopped. I was like, before you even tell me how to do it, because I would love to know, because I'm one of those people, okay? Um, it's so crazy that literally this morning I woke up and I was like, how do you even talk to your people? And I'm a busy person. I gotta wake up, dogs, I gotta do the things. So it's not like I can just get on my phone, look it up really quick, and then do all the things. But I like woke up that morning, I had opened, and he was one of my first people, and he literally was like, I was like, I can't believe that you're even bringing this up, because I was thinking this. I was having these thoughts this morning. How can I do this? How can Lily go and talk to her people? Because I can't go to Boise. I just can't do that. Um, and he said you can write to them. You can get online. You can go to their page. They have contact information. You can write to them. You can email to them. Um, Most of the time they don't respond per se, but they should be reading it, you know. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was a really cool little, like, the universe or God coming together and just putting information into your life. And he kind of told me what he's done in the past, and I don't know. I just thought it was really cool. The universe is out there working its magic, and that's how I know we're all connected. Honestly, like if I'm asking these questions, and I'll ask it out loud. I'm the type of person, I have a thought, I'll ask it out loud. You put out into the world what you want to receive, and so it was amazing how quick the universe gave. I just thought that was really cool. Um, and so I just to summarize it, it was getting involved, being awake. He touched on APAC. He touched on our greatest ally, which a lot of people around here are, I don't want to say they're pro greatest ally, but I don't think they are awoken to everything that's going on, which hopefully changes, because we're talking about it more and more and more. Um, he put it best as like being awake is what influences change, and that's how it is, because their greatest ally has been around for years and years, and he has known this. Like, he knows our greatest ally has influenced this for years and years, but we're just barely coming around to the idea that that can be true, and that is true. you know um, so I just thought, I just at the end, because I'm probably a few years out from this, but I was just like, I think one day, once I finally have some clear definitions of things, kind of understand what all the different levels are, I think I want to get into local politics, and I've only told, he would be the second person I told this to, at work, and I was just like, yeah, I think I might one day get into local politics. Maybe one day my voice will be good enough to lead the people. And I know a lot of people have problems with me, and they think I'm opinionated and things like that, but I hope still I can lead from the front, lead from example, and just understand and do good, because I'm so driven by justice, and like if I see an injustice, like it just makes me cringe. And I'm such a rule, like I just want people to follow the rules, like I understand some rules are there to be broken, but like there's rules to being a good person, there's rules to not screwing over your citizens, there's rules, like there's just basic human things that I think get missed now in politics because we are so checked out and we don't want to opt in. And at the end, we had to finish up. We had probably been sitting there talking for, I don't know, like an hour, And what I do, like, it takes a little bit of time from beginning to end. I'm probably one of the quickest at it. And by the end, he just like knuckle punched me or fist bumped me, whatever that is, and he was like, "You keep going, kiddo. I hope to see you out there running in local politics," And I was just like, "Really?" Because like I feel like I'm still so young and knowing things, and I just want to know. And so both people have said that. They're like, "I hope to see you out there. Like, if you're out there, I'm gonna vote for you." Like we had really cool conversations and. Maybe we didn't see eye to eye on everything. Like one guy that said that to me, like he was definitely pro our greatest ally. Like, but he was like, he even said, he was like, "Let me see your sample ballot. I'm gonna vote for who you vote for." And I was like, "Dang, like you are probably double my age. That's cool that you would want that." I didn't have my sample ballot on me. I just had it in my head of who I was gonna vote for. But I thought that was really cool. That he asked me for that. So I was like, okay, like maybe the research I'm doing, maybe it is going to make a difference, right? Because I'm obviously seeing it in my day-to-day, like just the conversations that I'm having with people. And so knowledge is going to be power, guys. And I really think that if you keep tuning in and you do the research, and I know it's hard, right? And you get involved, even if it's just 10%, 10% from everybody is way better than what we have been doing, And if more people can get involved and more people vote, I think there is optimism out there, and that's the way that I see the optimism is people banding together. And people coming together, and so what was normally like, I don't want to say all my conversations are boring and monotonous, but what normally could be a long 45 minutes for $5, literally $5, I think I got more out of that than I did all week. I got more clarity. I got what a constitutional is. I got somebody's perspective that's been around a lot longer than I have, but still we're on the same page, like you are not so different than I, and I am not so different than you. Doesn't matter the age, right? Common people are more similar to each other, and we need to stop fighting, And I remember the days that I would use to avoid all politics in the store. People would come in and like turn the TV on to Fox News or whatever, and I'm like, hey, can we not do that here? If somebody turned Fox News onto my store now, I would still say, we're not doing that here. We don't do gaslighting. We don't do fake news. So, but I remember I would just say, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to talk politics. When Trump was running, the second time people wanted to talk about it. COVID was happening, people wanted to talk about it, and I just was not about spreading it, And I think the way we're talking about politics is changing. And I think that's the difference. It's not, it's how can we talk together? How can we influence each other to be better and to make the better choice, So I thought that was pretty cool, and this is all just me testing the waters, seeing what information I can extract from people, kind of gauging if they're going to be mad, if they're going to be angry, can we talk about it, And so last week we talked about midterms, right? Which I thought were, which I went on the journey thinking that midterms were primaries, right? And when I got to the end, I said, what am I talking about? Like, I thought I was talking about one thing. And then I looked up, I was like, this is the definition that I have, and this is my understanding of blah, blah, blah. What is this? And they said, oh, it's primaries, right? I literally could not figure out what I was talking about. And so, just briefly, because it's actually not too much information, we're going to go through what primaries are. And so, what Idaho just went through were the primaries. And that was essentially like the semifinals of the thing. It's like the semifinals. That's those are the candidates that we're gonna send up to the finals, and then they're gonna hash it out to see who wins, right? And so each political party essentially has to narrow it down to one person that represents them on the ballot. And so this is generally it is a statewide election where regular voters choose which candidate they want the political party to nominate, right? And so there's two ways that the state handles this process. Most states handle it like Idaho does, and it's like secret voter way, right? So just the traditional voting way. This is where you go to your polling place, and you have various polling places. You have a designated polling place in Idaho, or if you're going to early vote, you can go to a specific place, but you have a designated polling place, and then you go, you cast your ballot, and then it's done, and they count your ballot, right? This is what most states do. I didn't realize there was another way, right? And through my research, they have caucuses, which I thought was a kind of an interesting little tidbit. So this is where the public meets at public places. This could be schools, this could be community centers, but you gather together, and then you debate, you discuss, and then you openly vote for candidates. And only a handful of states use this. I assume because it's harder to get people, honestly, I think it's harder to get people in person, Maybe they couldn't, you could incorporate Zoom or some sort of like video out where you can like YouTube style, broadcast it, and then your comments. I think there's new age ways that you could do this, but I think that also have its own complication in terms of like bots or people like that are not truly Americans. There'd have to be some way to keep it like in-house, in town, so like it wouldn't be influenced. But I can see why a lot of states don't go this way, just because getting people to turn out is hard. If you've ever like tried to do a work event, if you've ever tried to do just something else, I feel like a lemonade stand, it's hard to get people to turn out to something like that. So I can see why that we do primaries that way. I thought it was real. So I was curious, right? I was like, why do we have the primaries, And I found out that it's a relatively new process. I mean, the U.S. is a relatively new country in terms of other countries, right? Like 250 years, something like that. So I thought that this was interesting when I was going through it. So a little bit of history. We have them because in the first century and a half, and probably now, okay, let me just preface this. Probably now, we had a small group of powerful leaders that picked nominees behind closed doors. And I thought that's similarities to what we're seeing now, you know? The average voter had zero say during this time. And so during the 1968 Democratic Convention, there was a shift. So the Vietnam War was going on, okay? Martin Luther King and JFK were assassinated. Another parallel, right? That's a war, assassination, right? And the draft, right? What recently happened? Didn't they just raise the age limit for the military, right? I thought that was interesting. So these weird correlations are happening like they were in 1968. History repeats itself. This is why we need to be awake. This is why they're gaslighting us. This to me is all crazy. This is like, it's all been earth-shattering news for me the last year when I've been awoken, because I'm like, why are all these correlations happening when I'm doing this research, right? So 1968, Vietnam War was happening, MLK and JFK were assassinated months before this, and the draft, right? So people swarmed to nominees that were anti-war. Primary votes for the voters primarily voted for Senator Eugene McCarthy. And then when the convention happened, the results were completely ignored because primaries weren't legally binding. The power belonged to governors, party bosses, and union leaders at this point. Now is it corporate companies? Insiders handed the nominations to Hubert Humphrey, who was the sitting vice president at this time as well. It is interesting to notate that Humphrey hadn't won a singular popular vote and had not run in a single primary state. He was handpicked by the elites. If you Google it, Google will even tell you that. He was handpicked by the elites. It's crazy. After this, the public had a realization very similar to what we're having now. It's crazy. History repeats itself. We're having a realization that the system is rigged. It is rigged. And because of this, change has to happen, right? We have to get better. We have to, right? And so there was major reform in both parties. And by 1972, they shifted to the modern primary system that we're seeing today, which is much more democratic. Some things that primaries shape, they're very important, right? This is where momentum can be lost, where momentum can be gained, and that's one of the things that if you gain, and I'm learning all these things, but if you gain in places like Iowa and New Hampshire first, then you get massive media coverage. And so I guess that's where you want to win first for your primaries, at least on the federal level. Candidates who perform poorly run out of money and they drop out, which also I think is very interesting. Like, I understand you have to have some money to run, but I don't think money should be the primary aspect, So I thought that was kind of interesting. For another thing that they shape is they shape the message. To win, candidates have to appeal to what their party is most passionate about. So it often forces candidates to be much more like upfront or have more distinct views than they generally would, and more distinct positions, just to try and gain that favor. The ideas usually win the platform, and the ideas that win the platform usually become the platform. And then the last thing that the primaries do is they really test the candidates. It's several months long, the process. There's intense media coverage all the time. It's expensive. And you have to manage, not only your emotions, but a budget, but you have to organize volunteers. This is like, it's like the dress rehearsal, like the before the scenes, the practice run for the general election. One thing that I wanted to go over was the delegate math and what that phrase means. And it says, so what it says is when you vote in a primary, you aren't actually voting for the candidate directly. You're voting for delegates, individuals who are locked in to represent that candidate at the party's national convention in the summer. That final nominee is elected. And when I was going, I do use AI for some of my things, AI said crowned instead of elected. And I said, why would you say crowned instead of elected? Why? And it said, because that's essentially what it is. You get crowned. I thought that was the craziest thing. It's all about perspective, right? We've already done our voting, so now they get to decide. I don't know. I thought that was really interesting that it said that. All in all, though, the big thing and why I wanted to go over primaries today is because of the correlation that we are seeing today. Things that were happening in 1968 feel like they're happening now. And yes, we have social media. And yes, we have electronics. And yes, we have tablets and computers and phones and access all the time. But I don't think we're that different than we were back then. Yes, things change, but often things stay the same too. And so, all in all, I just think we need to get involved. We need to stand together. We need to stop fighting, I have a perfect example, Over the week, I posted on somebody's, I commented on somebody's thing, just on my views and opinions on something. I had a troll, post some crazy stuff and then post a GIF and then delete, and I said, hey, if you're going to try and debate me, if you're going to do all these things, stand up for yourself. Don't delete what you're saying. Have some authority when you're talking, And this girl then went to attack me on something that had happened 15 years ago, something that I moved past, right? Something that I've learned from, And I thought it was very interesting to see that your past can be brought up, and how volatile social media is and how angry people are, And the thing that she deleted had to do with JE and inappropriate things happening to minors and stuff like that. And then she deleted it, and then she posted it. I'm sorry, and she posted that something happening, And I was just like, hey, I think you and I are closer. You're really hanging from low-hanging fruit from my past, really aiming there, right? But because of something that happened in my past, I just want to let you know what you're talking about, we agree with. You literally made my point even stronger, right? And I hope these trolls and the people that are very liberal and they have these crazy opinions. Like, I hope one day they can come down a little bit, and they can see that we're not so different. I want the JE files to be released as much as the next person. Realistically, though, unless an American goes and risks their lives, risks their jobs, puts it on the line to get that information and to whistle-blow it, right? I think it's going to be a while until we get it, right? That's just me being real and how our government's going. Unless we take a total 180 and we elect somebody completely different, somebody that is a person of a real world, a working class person, not funded by these big APACs and all these various countries and all these things, can be bought and sold. Until we hire somebody that can't be bought and sold, this is where we're going to be at. And it's going to take Americans stepping up, and it's going to take real people stepping up, talking about it, fighting for it, voting for it, It's going to take people coming down and trying to understand, instead of attack, let's come to an understanding, because I know we're not so different. That girl on the post, I know we stand very close together when it comes to the JE files, right? I know that we want them released. But the difference is how we're going about it, and the understanding of what needs to change. And I just want to leave everybody with this, right? It's, if you can do anything, it's just do a little bit of research on your local politicians. Reach out to them about something that you don't like, because they have the ability to change it. Band together. Find groups of like-minded people that are willing to talk about it, right? Start a podcast. Go to your local newspaper. There's a lot of things that you can do to try and change the world for a better place, and we all should start somewhere. We all can make America better, but it starts in your local community, and it starts in your local county, and it starts in your city, in your state. And it's going to take time, and I think we can do it. We elect somebody every 4 years. That is a very small window in the grand scheme of time, So it is possible to affect change. And yes, with the 4-party system, it's going to be hard. Or the 4-year party system, it's going to be hard, right? But we got to start on the local level, and then we can think bigger. Start small, and then we think bigger. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I actually had a lot of fun writing it today, and if you liked it, please like the episode. I would really appreciate if you would do that. That will tell me that people are out there listening. Yeah. Again, I'll see you next week. And if you have any topics that you want me to research, if you want me to talk about, drop it in the comments. I would be happy to do the research. I find it fun and soothing, and I do like talking about things, and so it's actually really fun. So drop it in the comments if you want me to talk about anything, and remember to like. I will see you next week, and thank you for tuning in to the Live, Laugh, Lily podcast.